we are very interested in looking at the links between human rights and the culture of peace. And we develop education programs in that sense. Because if you look at each human right, each one is about stopping violence, or most of them, the first ones, the very first ones, the first five are about stopping violence. The first one is about dignity, and the second one is about right to life, and so forth, and the right not to be subject to torture. So how can we help individuals and nations overcome violence is the question that we have asked ourselves. And we believe that it's not possible to nurture a culture of nonviolence without speaking about a culture of peace. This is a very strong concept. Until now, we have been looking at the culture of nonviolence as a way forward. And we need to develop this new culture, which is radically different from a culture of violence, of course, and it's also different from a culture of nonviolence, in the sense that it creates the ingredients to create. It gives the ingredients to create a culture where everyone has its place and everyone can flourish, everyone can feel comfortable, despite or with the diversity of all. With the differences in opinion, with the differences in needs, with the differences in coming from disputes. If we have this culture, then we're aspiring to peace in such a way that we will find solutions from within ourselves. We believe that we can only teach this if we teach it to all age groups. So we need to start both with the very young, i.e. 4-year-olds, and with adults, because it's adults that are teaching the 4-year-olds. So it goes both ways. The culture of peace is about teaching values, and in particular human values and moral values, and we distinguish between the two. And it's teaching how to develop attitudes and behaviors that will be conducive to a culture of peace. So when do these happen? When we have stronger emotions, like we have fear, or we're worried, or we're in hatred, or we're in anger, or we're defiant, or we're looking for the English word, le mépris, la méfiance. La méfiance. How do you say méfiance? Forgot.
Fear of others?
No.
Fear.
Yeah, méfiance is a. I'm missing the word. Anyway, I hope you'll cut this part. And when you have these different, if you have fear, you cannot have a culture of peace. So we really need to teach from a very young age how to not be in fear. It's not even to overcome fear. It's just not be in fear. In other words, to feel confident, have self-esteem, understand one's roots, use those roots to reach out to others instead of creating a shell from which to protect oneself. If one is in the mode of reaching out to others, then everyone on the other side also feels relieved and relaxed. Whereas if we are worried about the culture of the other one feels it and becomes tense, and it creates diffidence and acrimony. So we teach children how to develop new attitudes, to come out of typical fears and climb out of them and develop new behaviors that they really enjoy. We also look at what is peace? Is peace the absence of war? Obviously not. But how many people realize that peace is not the absence of war? Peace is so much more, and peace can only have an effective function for human rights if people understand that peace has to be defined by what is present and not what is absent. If you define something by what is absent, it's not interesting, it's not motivating, it's not tangible. If you define peace by what is present, then people understand that it's about harmony for themselves and thus for others. And it's about being able to do all the things that one is capable of exploiting one's potential, that you cannot do in a simple state of absence of war, because in the state of absence of war, you're always worried that war comes again. Absence of war means that it's a mild period between two very serious war situations. So we have to move out of that and say that crises are the exception and peace is the norm. Okay, I have just been asked the question of how does one introduce and tailor peace education to different cultures, be it in Asia or Africa or the West. And there is some tailoring that can go and be done, but it will be at a very low level of detail. For example, we use the example of cooking something.
Yes.
And in cooking something, a very good meal, you have different flavors. And if you try and eat each flavor on its own with a spoon, it's awful. So if you eat flour with a spoon, you cannot eat it. And you cannot do this with salt, and you cannot do it with pepper, and you cannot do it with sugar. Even sugar you cannot do. So where it gets tailored is that maybe in the West we will use the example of a cake, because it's so incredible that you transform eggs and flour into a cake. But in Africa, cakes are not known. So we changed the example, and we use the example of a stew, because Africans eat stew every day. So they add beans and lentils and herbs and salt and pepper, of course, chili. And this way, children understand that it's the mixture that makes the good taste. And that if you take every ingredient alone, it's either bland or impossible to eat, not interesting, not attractive. So children want to be attractive, so they can be more attractive by finding a combination with their fellow friends that are of different ethnic groups, for example, and identify with the good taste. So that's a small example of how you differentiate between different cultures. But in the end, we are all the same. We are human beings. We have parents. Later we get children, maybe. We have the same fears, and we have the same angers, and we have the same life cycle. We live about the same number of years. We have the same emotions. We have the same need for love, and we have the same fear of violence. So what's the difference? There is no difference.
It's very interesting your point of view. I just like to ask you a simple, let's summarize. How you summarize the idea of Reine de la Paix, human rights?
Okay. I have in our course we thus train trainers to train teachers, and for example in Ivory Coast we are training 420 trainers, which are training 33,600 teachers to train 1.5 million children, both in school and outside school, because not all children are in school. And within that course, for the adults, we make it different. We test them on the idea of what is the link between human rights and peace. Does human rights bring peace? And they are convinced. People from Ivory Coast are always convinced, 100%, that human rights brings peace. And the same thing about democracy. Of course, democracy brings peace. And the answer is no. It's not true. And here are some examples. We live in Switzerland here. And in Switzerland, we definitely have a good rating for human rights. We have a few exceptions. There are a few things not working well. And we have a very good rate. We have the best rate regarding democracy. And despite that, we are voting things that are bringing war. We are voting. 70% of the population voted a few years ago to continue exporting arms. But if you export arms, you're exporting violence. And you're also exporting violence back to yourself. And you're creating disruption, migration, people having to leave their country. And they end up in Switzerland making Swiss people unhappy. So the whole thing is totally contradictory. We have voted the same year, we voted against minarets. And the way it was done in a very unpeaceful way. It could have been done in a totally administrative way, but it was done in a way that was demagogical. So there is no link between, no necessary link between human rights being respected, democracy being respected, and the coming up of peace or the culture of peace. There's a lot of work to be done in the culture of peace, and we must not take everything for granted. It's a lot of hard work. So, yes, we absolutely need human rights. We're the first ones to defend them. And yes, we need democracy. But we mustn't just dream that these two things will bring peace. Peace comes also from the way we educate our children.